Okay. So I'll go over a little bit of keeping as we dive in here. But as you all know, we're here to talk about content discoverability, and we will be touching on accessibility and we went over that last time, but we'll talk kind of in a sense of accessibility metadata and websites that are displaying that and a little bit extra as well. So as I did last time, I just wanted to go over quickly. If you do have a question, feel free to jump in and raise your hand. I should be able to see it here. Or if you're not comfortable being on audio, feel free to put it in the chat and Amanda will be monitoring that and she'll jump in and interrupt me if need be. But we always prefer to keep it kind of conversational if at all possible. So a quick spiel on eBOUND. I know some of you are clients, some of you aren't. This is our small but mighty team here of 5 full-time staff plus Amanda, who works with us on many, many projects, and we are so thankful for. And then our volunteer accountant, Ernie, here, who we hope never retires fully. And so for anyone that isn't fully aware, some of our services are ebook creation. So we do conversion from the print book to the EPUB. And then we also help set up core source and distribution, marketing, sending out all of the books to the major vendors. And then our third arm, which I would say is what we're doing here today, is the educational research and accessibility side of things. So as Leslie said, I'll be doing the first portion of the presentation and I will then throw it over to Amanda. If you want to write down my email address, if you have any follow-ups, feel free to do that now. It's just my name _ at eboundcanada.org. And then just wanted to throw up Amanda's email as well, in case you want to take that down because you have a burning question that you need to ask. Okay. And I'm just going to once again depend on the chat here. So I have some questions for the audience just so I get a better idea of kind of where you're at. So I always like to know how you kind of manage your metadata and your digital books. So do you have a separate department or are you kind of a one-person show that does all of this? I'll just bring up the chat again here. And then I'm also wondering if you outsource your audits or if you perform audits of new titles only. So just trying to get an idea here of what your experience is with kind of getting titles out and knowing if there's an issue with them at all. So I'm just going to stop share for 1 second here, and I just want to switch over. Sorry, 1 sec. I just got the wrong one on here. There we go. There. Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, perfect. Some answers coming in there. So if you are kind of a smaller department, it is good to have some kind of processes in place that will really help to determine if there's any issues and how to fix them. So I see some answers coming in here. So 3 people manage metadata. So 1 role. So it seems like it's at the smaller publishers, this is kind of what we expect. It's often rolled into another position. 1-person production. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So that's good to know. And I think this is the same as it's generally the same audience as the previous session that we did. So I'm thinking most people, can you put in the chat if you are a core source user or another aggregator user? You could put in the aggregator that you are if you like as well. Firebrand. Okay. Okay. Core source, lots of core source. Okay, great. So a lot of people using core source at eBOUND, that's what we use. So a lot of what we focus on today will be core source related, but it can be applied to whatever your aggregator is, because there would be kind of a similar issue that would come up because they're usually vendor issues. Okay, so moving forward with that. So our hopes and dreams for the next hour, we're hoping you can come away with a more well-rounded understanding of what needs to be done so that the books go into your aggregator and then go out to distribute clean and better instruction to prevent errors as well. So I want to start just with some metadata kind of general rules. In the past, I've always said to go ahead and just try and distribute your metadata and figure out if there's errors at that point. But it really should come down to making sure that it's as clean as it can be going in, because it's always easier to fix it.
Crappy metadata. God.
Oh, I think we got somebody. Not Amanda, can you mute maybe if need be? And then we also really want to focus on checking that your metadata has arrived in core source again, or your aggregator clean, and then that it's valid and can go out. So I'll go over some kind of main samples here of metadata and where we often see issues. I'm just going to move this down here. So again, these are all from the core source spreadsheet, but you can apply this to your aggregator or whatever spreadsheet is used for them, or even just your Onyx provider. So these are things that we see regularly causing issues. Mostly today we're focusing on ebooks, I'd say, but this is a main thing that has come up with audiobooks lately, is people forget the narrator. So this is something, if you attended the audiobook webinar that we put on not too long ago, this is something I really harped on. Audiobook processing times are incredibly slow comparatively. So you really want to make sure that you have your narrator in there and that your files are as clean as they can be. Not pictured here is the other option for the narrator, where you can do the last name, first name separate. And we do recommend you fill that in as well, because certain vendors, they do pull from that as opposed to just the full name for some reason. I have no idea why, but that is just how it is. So the spreadsheet sample I wanted to go over for library pricing and agency. So these are two things that often end up keeping books from appearing on Apple and then on all library vendors. So it still happens often that people say, you know, they aren't seeing that many sales, what's happening? And they're missing their library pricing. So if you see here where it says library, we need to make sure that there is a price that's entered for all the currencies under just library. So that business model is often missing. So we've got the three business models. Retail is the one that people tend to not forget. Library sometimes gets overlooked, so making sure that you have both of those. And then another one that often gets forgotten that is just for Apple is agency. And there's some real particulars with this as well. So agency pricing needs to end in 99. And it also has to have the price type of 41 or 42, depending on the currency. So really important to have that agency pricing, or your titles will not go up for sale on Apple. The library pricing, we get this question a lot, that how should our pricing be? Where should we place the pricing? And for library, it should always be 30 to 50 above retail. The thinking there that the one copy is going to be used multiple times, so the price markup is normally much higher. If you're an eBOUND client, you should also be opting into all the pricing models. So if you are an eBOUND client, I believe this is only for us. They haven't come right out and said this at Overdrive, but these additional pricing models allow you to sell your books and in a different way. So if you are an eBOUND client, feel free to ask me about that. I've got some follow-up materials there. And then another thing that often prevents books from going up for sale or therefore being discoverable is a missing price, missing discount on EBSCO. So this is from a long time ago, when we negotiated the contract. Again, this is for eBOUND clients, and you should really make sure that there isn't something going on like this with any other vendor, because these discount codes, if a vendor is expecting it and it's not entered, then it won't go up for sale. So this is just one example from EBSCO. I'm not sure if this is something that EBSCO has with other clients outside of eBOUND, but it's a good example of something that can prevent something going up for sale. So I know certain people have discount codes that they use with Amazon or different vendors, and you just need to make sure that if that's in your contract and that's been agreed upon, that it's being included. Again, this is just eBOUND clients, but this is either for scholarly or trade. The one I have here is for trade. If it were for scholarly, you would trade, or you would change it to scholarly here and another S here, and it would be 20% instead. Again, I can go over the specifics of that in a follow-up. Okay, and this is another really important one with discoverability, making sure that your products are linked together. So if you have a ebook that's going out, this is how you link it to the print version. So on Amazon, for instance, this is how you are making sure that your books are showing up on the vendor page with the individual ways to read. So it will show up as the EPUB, as the print book, all on the same page. If this were for an audiobook, we would have an additional line here that then references the ebook. So again, on Amazon, they're all linked together. Scribd is another one that needs to link the audiobook and the ebook. All of the library platforms use that as well to link the titles together. So making sure that you've got your related product identifier, really important, because sometimes people need certain versions, certain formats, I should say. And so they're going to look only for that. Okay, and this is another one that is a little bit confusing, so feel free to jump in if there is something that is not really making sense. Apple is very, very finicky, and you do need to mark your titles as digital only if they are new. Okay, new according to Apple is the pub date is within 12 months. So if you don't mark it as digital only, then you have to adhere to Apple's pricing structure. Okay, and I've got that on the next slide. So this is, again, on only for Apple, so it's agency pricing only, but I would say that this is one of the things that trips people up the most and that we kind of tend to forget in between quarters and uploading titles. So it's really easy to forget these things. The only downside with marking it digital only is it does technically remove your title from being a new book, but we don't have any proof or numbers on titles being marked as new and it actually increasing sales. But if your title isn't for sale on Apple, it does. So we do really recommend that you use this workaround, even if it means it's not being qualified as new anymore. So this is the pricing chart. I don't know if this is familiar to most people. We do have an article on our website that's open to the public that I can also follow up with. And I also have asked Apple to send along a updated chart because, as you can see here, it ends at 42. This is kind of an older chart, and with textbooks and things like that and the price of everything, it has gone up. So there is extended numbers that I'm just waiting on our contact at Apple to send us. But essentially, if you don't mark it as digital only, even if it's not digital only, you can, and your book is listed as 24 here, you would only be able to list it as $11.99 on Apple. So I'll just click through these guys. So again, these are the three options that you can do for this retailer specific info. And I'm going to go over the Onyx in a second here. So this is the real workaround is going ahead with digital only. If it's older than 12 months and you leave it at other, then that's fine. But most of the time people are uploading new titles. So making sure that you're getting as much money as you can for the sale of each title is kind of preferable, I would say. I'm just going to lift this up and see if there's any questions here. Okay. So I know that's a little bit confusing. Does that kind of make sense? I'll go over the Onyx here as well. For anyone that doesn't use a spreadsheet and doesn't have retailer specific info, I can send you this, and you do distribute to Apple. I can send you this. This is what CoreSource uses. I'm not 100% sure what something like Firebrand would use, but because this is a vendor specific thing, everyone should be sending in this information to Apple so that things process properly. So this is across the board. So I'll follow up with all of this Onyx information here as well. And I'll just double check. Okay. So if you have, those are the kind of the main things that we often see that are preventing titles from being live and discoverable. So if you do get them into CoreSource or into your aggregator and you've sent them out successfully, you just want to make sure that you're checking your distribution errors, keeping in mind the time frame that things should process. So audiobooks, like I said, can take up to 2 weeks on Audible, and ebooks, usually they can process sometimes right away, but up to 72 hours. So if really, unfortunately, until someone invents a tool that allows us to see if everything is live at the same time, the only way to really check is to go onto the websites. So that's part of the auditing that we always recommend. So Overdrive, you can search on the main site to see if that title is live. But if a patron is searching, they won't be able to see the title unless their library has purchased it. So sometimes we get people concerned that they can't get a title from Overdrive from their library, but the issue there is actually that the librarian or whomever does the purchasing hasn't purchased that title for that local library catalog. So that's why it's not available, but it should be visible in like the main Overdrive. If you do have any of these vendors, these are all sites with backends, meaning you can log into them to see if the titles have arrived where they're supposed to go. So there's often a bit of a disconnect between sending the things out of your aggregator and then them arriving and processing properly at the vendor. For example, Overdrive recently, there was a spelling mistake in a publisher name. And so the titles were being sent successfully out of CoreSource, but they weren't processing at Overdrive. And I wasn't getting any error reports or anything because they weren't even coming into the system. So there wasn't even an error report or anything. So doing what I said in the previous slide, where being aware of the time frames of things when they should process, and then just having like a quick check to make sure that they've arrived is really helpful. And then having auditing be part of your workflow. So when you're uploading a bunch of files for your fall season and you're creating all the metadata, making sure that you get everything out on a certain date, and then setting a reminder to actually come back and make sure that it has it's showing up the way it's supposed to is really important. And like I said, unfortunately, hopefully there will be a way to check everything at the same time, but it's a lot of manual labor right now. And I just quickly wanted to go through a few sites displaying accessibility metadata. Right now, not all of them are doing anything with it, but they are still saying, send it to us, we'll store it, and then as soon as we're ready to display it, we'll be ready to go, as opposed to trying to get it all in and process it at the same time. So I just wanted to quickly show a few sites that are processing and displaying it. So VitalSource, it's mostly the educational vendors. So they've got quite an extensive list here on VitalSource of everything. Red Shelf also has a separate tab that has the summary, and you can see here some of the information hasn't been sent, the accessibility conformance and the certifier credential. So making sure that there is something entered into your metadata so that those spaces aren't empty is really important as well. DeMarc is another one. You can actually search by accessibility on DeMarc, and it looks like this. So it'll show you all of the different features. And lastly, Catalyst also has a section here over on the left for accessibility info. So this is another really great way, especially for educational vendors, to get your books out there and make sure that they're discoverable and usable to the widest amount of people possible. Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing and throw over to Amanda now.
Thanks, Emma. Hello, everybody. It's good to see those of you I know, and for those of you who I've just met, it's lovely to meet you. Just like Emma, I'm going to go through my little slideshow. Please interrupt me if you have questions. Feel free to ask them in the chat. Emma will keep an eye on them. Otherwise, we'll have a little question period at the end if I can hustle my way through this presentation, and then we can ask them then. All right, let me just get this shared here. Okay, so you should all be seeing my slide, which is metadata for discoverability. So Emma has now walked you through how to make sure your books are live. Let's talk about some ways to make them discoverable. I know most of you know what discoverability means, but just in case, it's just about making sure that the people can find your books generally online, even if they don't know they want them. So if you think about the shopper who would like go to the bookstore and they'd ask the bookseller, I'm looking for a Canadian history book for my mom's birthday, but she reads a lot, so it has to be new, and I don't want anything about World War II. A good bookseller is going to help that person, but maybe they're shopping on Amazon. So we need to do our best to lead them to our Canadian history books. We are going to touch very briefly on leading them to our accessible Canadian history books. Hang on, I just want to make sure I'm actually changing the slides here. There we go, perfect. As Emma mentioned, it's mostly challenges in terms of accessible ebook discoverability. Not many places are displaying that accessibility data. And that makes it really challenging from a discoverability standpoint. If no one's showing that data, how do you use it? Additionally, right now, we as an industry haven't really settled on a way to display the data in a way that's useful to readers and book buyers. In the Netherlands, they did a really small study of only 7 people. So very small, so take this with like a huge grain of salt. But that study determined that the metadata have limited value when ordering or borrowing a digital publication. So right now, it's not actually useful from a discoverability standpoint. Hang on to that because it's very useful in general, but maybe not from a discoverability standpoint. eBOUND is working on a much larger accessible metadata display study. I'm part of that study, full disclosure. And we're building a test site that displays accessibility metadata. And then we're going to ask users and readers to tell us if it works and if it could be better. Our survey is going out this week. We will have more to talk about next year. But for now, we don't know how readers want to have that information. So the display of it's maybe not even all that useful. However, there are a few opportunities. Someday this is going to change. Someday someone is going to figure out how to display accessible metadata. And the last thing you want is to be that person whose books are flagged with like unknown accessibility or publisher has not supplied accessibility information. You do not want to be that person. So send the data in your Onyx files, in your databases now. There are also some opportunities to surface this data right now. They're not perfect. They might not actually aid in discoverability, but we are going to talk about them as we go through some more discoverability tips. Fundamentally, accessibility features are not a discoverability tool. They are trading data, their format, their page count. And that means that accessible ebook discoverability is exactly the same as regular book discoverability. First and foremost, readers are looking for a good read. They're not searching for accessible ebooks. They're searching for Canadian history books for my mom and hoping that what they find is going to be accessible to their mom. So make your books accessible first. Make them discoverable second, and then you have discoverable accessible books. All right, So I'm going to go through some discoverability basics, and then I am going to give you some specific and fairly new and interesting tips, I think, at the end. So stick around, some suspense here. So first thing is get your basics down. Title, author, cover, those all need to be correct. Your copy needs to be pretty. It needs to be well formatted. You need to have no spelling errors. Your trading data, your price, your pub date, etc., that needs to be correct. That includes your accessibility metadata. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be there. Emma talked about some of this in her auditing portion, but it is critical for discoverability. After all, if that customer wants a new history book and you've accidentally entered the pub year of your ebook as 2014 instead of 2024, she's not buying your book. So audit these books, go on the websites, make sure everything looks clean. All right, that's the basics. Oh, hang on, why will you not? There we go. We're also going to talk a bit about subject schemes here, because the easiest piece of discoverability metadata to start with are these subject schemes. Most of you are familiar with BISAC. I assume most of you are familiar with BISAC. Check, good, do that. Some of you might be familiar with BIC. No, BIC, we're done. BIC is gone. We'll talk about it, but no more. We'll talk about Thema, which replaced BIC, and then we're going to talk about everybody's favorites, which are keywords. BISAC. I hope that you are all assigning BISAC codes to all of your books, right? Please say you remember about that. Good. It is the most commonly used scheme in North America. It's super critical to get it right. I'm just going to give you some tips on this slide. I don't know what that blank slide was doing. Yes, so first tip, do not assign general codes unless you literally have no other option. Those are the ones that end in all zeros. So like FIC 0000 fiction general. Remember that you're actually assigning a book to all of the categories contained within a single BISAC category. So if you choose fiction, historical, medieval, your book is going to appear in fiction and historical fiction medieval. So there's no need to waste a BISAC on general fiction. It's already in there. Okay, the more the better, but most retailers only accept 3 or 4 BISACs. So really just assign 3 or 4 and you'll be fine. Do not mix fiction and nonfiction codes. Do not mix juvenile and YA or juvenile and adult or YA and adult, no matter how much you want to. No matter how much you're saying to me, but Amanda, that coloring book, it really is. It's for adults and for young adults. It's like, no, don't do it. I don't make the rules. I just tell you the rules. Thema is more flexible. We'll talk about that in a little bit. For now, let's have a little chat about Amazon. I don't want to talk about Amazon, guys. I never want to talk about Amazon. I would rather never talk about Amazon, but they are the major player in this space still. And worse, they're the ones with the least human input. You can't call someone at Amazon and ask them to help you, right? You can't send your reps out to like an Amazon store to shelve your books. It's just not going to happen. That means that our data for Amazon needs to be perfect. The second reason I'm going to talk about Amazon is that they're doing a lot of work on these categories, these bestseller ranks here. They're putting a lot of algorithmic strength into them. They're putting a lot of human hours into them. So let's steal from them for once. If they're doing the work, let's use it. So we're going to get here. But some of you might remember that once upon a time, these bestseller ranks that showed up on Amazon were just BISACs. You could just line them up 1 to 1. This is a BISAC category. It's not like that anymore. Remember that. We're coming back to it. For now, we're going to talk about BIC. A blank slide again. Fun. There we go. Once it was the UK standard, they stopped updating in 2010, which I am sorry to report was 13 years ago. It is officially obsolete as of February 2024. So really, please only use it if someone is literally forcing you. The official word from BIC is that BIC announced its plan to make obsolete the outdated BIC standard subject categories by the end of February 2024 as it scales up efforts to encourage the UK book industry to fully adopt Thema, the international multilingual subject category scheme for the global book trade. So use Thema, it's much better. They said so themselves. If you still have a trading partner who is specifically requesting BIC, do keep using it, but otherwise don't worry about it. Move on to Thema, which is much better. Thema is the new standard, which is to say it's 10 years old, but here we are. There's a ton of really good guidance out there on how to use it, including BookNet's excellent blog series and editor's own 6 golden rules. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I will give you some tips. Some things to know about Thema is that it is flexible, it is modern, I love assigning Thema codes. It's so fun. Your mileage may vary on that. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. There isn't yet a lot of North American retailer adoption. That is going to change. Okay, so some Thema tips. Make your first category your main subject. That's obvious. Just like BISAC, do not assign general codes if you can help it, because the codes include the whole thing. So if you code something FMR, which is fiction, fantasy, romance, it's also going to appear in fiction and in fantasy. So why bother just assigning fiction if it's already there? This is super critical for the place qualifiers. I wrote it this hugely long example, and the more I look at it, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there is a place qualifier, which is code 1KBC-CA-BFJ. That, if you break it down, goes from place, the Americas, North America, all the way down to the sea to sky corridor, right? So it's extremely specific to a specific part of BC. The big dream is that someday BC-based bookstores might want to get that specific, right? They might want to have a section on their website for books about the sea to sky corridor, but maybe a like independent bookstore in Ireland, they don't care that the book is about the sea to sky corridor. They only care that it's about Canada. But your code 1KBCCABFJ covers that whole range. That's the dream, and that's the big usage of it. And so that's why you should definitely assign super specific stuff. Okay, and super specific qualifiers, just like that one. The last thing to know about Thema, oh, I guess I should mention that categories start with a letter, qualifiers start with a number. You must assign a letter-based category. You may assign as many number-based qualifiers as you can fit in your database. All right, finally, feel free to mix and match codes to your heart's content, unlike BISAC, but there are rules and you must follow them. The official Thema site has really good guidance. When you're on the Thema category browser, there's sometimes like a little asterisk. Click on it, it'll give you the rules. If you do not know where that is, shoot me an email and I will link it for you. All right, so I said that thing about the dream, right? About the Irish bookstores and the BC bookstore. Like I said, it's the dream. Thema uptake in North America is a little bit slow. There's not a ton of uptake yet. Kobo displays it and uses it in a rudimentary way. I'll show that to you in a moment. But right now, there's like not a lot of uptake. That is going to change. And there is more usage in the UK and Europe. And as BIC gets entirely deleted, they're going to have to change that. So why not use it, right? Get ahead of the game now rather than scramble later. Here's an example of Thema using Kobo. This is yet another Ilona Winshaw mystery. Thanks, Touchwood, for allowing us to use all of your books without us asking. Sorry. This is on Kobo. All of these little pills are Thema, and you can just click on them and go to other Thema coded books. So the more people use them, the more fun it is. Amazon also uses Thema a little. Here's that slide again. Everybody remember this. We're going to come back to it. All right, we're going to talk quickly about keywords as well. Everybody loves keywords, right? Y'all love to assign them. I know you do. It's so fun. I could talk for hours about how to assign keywords. I have talked for hours about how to assign keywords. I apologize to anyone who has had to sit through those. But I'm going to stick to these 4 points for now. And if you have keyword questions, feel free to shoot me an email. First and foremost, they are not displayed to human beings for the most part. It doesn't mean they can't be displayed. So don't use them to say things you wouldn't want people to see. You can be a little bit more circumspect, but I wouldn't, don't put bad things in there. Secondly, they are almost always used for search engines, whether that's Google or like the internal search on a bookstore or Amazon. You have a limit of 250 bytes, which is functionally characters, but an accented character is worth 2 bytes. So, don't put accents in your keywords. That doesn't include spaces or punctuations. I have a little Google sheet that counts those characters. It strips out spaces and punctuation. It counts it into bytes. If you find yourself going over or way under, send me an email. I can link you to the spreadsheet. You can just use that. Finally, my favorite overarching keyword tip is to think like a reader. Unlike categories, these aren't for the book industry, right? They're for that woman who went into the bookstore searching for a history book for her mom, only she's not at a bookstore. She's on Amazon at 2 in the morning. How is she talking about your book? Those are your keywords. To help you along, you could go read like Goodreads or Amazon reviews of your comp titles. I'm also going to give you some tips in a little bit. But first, maybe keywords are a good place for your success. No, they're not. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do not put your keywords in your, or do not put your accessibility metadata in your keywords. Hold that thought. I am going to explain it. It's all going to come together. Here's that last slide again. Hooray. Everybody is so happy to see this one come back. Amazon, among other retailers, uses keywords to power its search, right? And that's the most important part about keywords. They help with this searchability, which is sort of the key piece of discoverability. However, Amazon also uses keywords to power these bestseller ranks. The bestseller categories are now built out of a combination of all three: BISAC, Thema, keyword, and then possibly some other Amazon proprietary info about like sales data and linking. But these are the ones that we can control, right? This is something that we know we can do to change this. I can't cite this source. This is experimental. This is things we've all learned. Amazon is not notably forthcoming about how their systems work. So, but from experimentation, this is how these are powered. I really recommend making these bestsellers, the bestseller ranks, your first stop in choosing subjects and choosing keywords. It's going to help you at all retailers, right? Because it will help you refine your subjects and pick good keywords. Amazon's using these categories for a reason, right? They are, for whatever reason, they think it's valuable that their customers be able to search for Canadian Western provinces biographies and memoirs. And if they think that, unfortunately, they're probably right. And so let's do it. Let's copy them. I will talk about how to use them, but just quickly to go back to that accessibility question, because Amazon is constantly refining their bestseller categories and because it's algorithmically generated, adding these accessibility keywords, like adding accessible information to your keywords, is actually just going to end up putting you in a category for books about accessibility, right? So unless your book is about accessibility, that's not going to work. Keywords are meant for words about the content of your book. Accessibility is not the content. It's like page count. So if you wouldn't put your page count somewhere, don't put your accessibility information there. Okay. Quickly, we're going to talk about what we should do with these bestseller ranks. We want to use them to help us guide our choices. You've probably, by the time you're selecting comps and stuff, you've probably already selected your BISACs. And then you're going to use your BISACs to think about your comps. Once you have your really good comparative titles, right? You know, you've got 4 comps, you like them, go check them out on Amazon and scroll down to these bestseller ranks. Where are those comps in here? Do they line up with BISAC? In this example, the 20th century Canadian history does kind of, right? So we're going to assign the BISAC of History Canada Post-Confederation. Great. The other two, but we'll add a bio category. So bio, whatever is relevant. For the rest, we can add a bunch of Thema. So in this case, we're going to add Northwest Territories for the Thema. We're going to add British Columbia from Thema. And then finally, we get to keywords, right? All I've done here is I've just taken these categories and stuck semicolons between them and used some synonyms where I need to. So Canada, Canadian Territories, biography, memoir, to get to Canadian Territories, biographies, and memoir. At that point, those keywords are going to get you in this category alongside your comp title. That's good both for Amazon, right? Because now you're alongside the comp titles you want to be alongside, you're in the right categories, and it's good for searchability because people are searching, Amazon thinks, for this information. So great place to put those, a great place to use that. You should use, if you use this, you are going to end up with some really powerful categories and keywords that are going to help you with discoverability. But don't add anything that isn't relevant to your content, right? If your comp title is set in 1900s and your title is set in the 2000s, there's no reason to add 1900s. That's not going to help you. Just use your gut, use reviews, use these bestseller ranks. It's a new-ish way to get you to keywords and categories that really power up the discoverability of your titles. Even your accessible titles, not just your inaccessible titles, all of your titles. So you know your books are live and you've got your subject schemes and your keywords working the way you want. And your books are discoverable. This is great. But how do readers know that your books are accessible? You got a couple of options. I don't love them, spoiler, but you have them. Some publishers are experimenting with putting their Benetech seal on their covers. I hope desperately that they are keeping their alt text up to date to reflect this information. Otherwise, it's not super useful, but they're doing it. Some publishers are putting that information on their websites, but I forgot who, and I couldn't find their website. Okay, some people are adding discoverability information to their copy. I saw it, it looked great, but I couldn't find that either. Couldn't find it. So it might not actually be useful for discoverability at all. I knew exactly what I was looking for, and I spent hours trying to find it. And in the end, I had to put horrible things in my slideshow. So it's really important to add your discoverability metadata or your accessibility metadata to the places it belongs, right? So in that section in your ebook metadata database, if you do not know where that is, contact them. I don't necessarily recommend putting it in places it doesn't belong. You can think about it. Don't stress too much about it. Right now, we're still figuring out as an industry how to tell folks that books are accessible. We're not quite there yet. We're going to get there. We are going to get better if we advocate for it. So part of this is that we have to send the metadata. Do make sure it's in your schema.org files and your Onyx files. If you do that and you can't find where to put it in your database, advocate for it. Go to them and say, hey, core source, I really want to add this, but your darn spreadsheet won't let me. Once you've sent it out, you can go to Overdrive and you say, hey, Overdrive, I'm sending this data. How come you're not displaying it? I know it feels a little bit like we're shouting into the wind here, but people are talking about this and we should keep talking about it. Eventually, someone is going to display this. Make sure you're sending it. In the meantime, we're just going to quickly talk about keeping your data fresh for discoverability purposes. All you can really do is make your ebooks accessible, send out that metadata, and hope someone will start displaying it. Second, you need to ensure that your books are generally discoverable, and that means keeping your metadata up to date. It does mean doing ongoing audits. I am sorry to tell you that. You just need to audit your books. I think you should audit them 3 times. Go check them out after you send the data out for the first time, which is about 6 months pre-pub, generally around pub date, and then 6 months after pub date. And then you should also check if you send updates to make sure that those updates are taking. And you're like, ugh, updates. Okay, awards and reviews are obvious. Make sure you put them in the proper spots in your metadata. But you should also consider adding them to your copy, because not all retailers display awards and reviews, and frequently the copy is indexed for search. So if you put award-winning in your copy and someone types award-winning ebook into Amazon, which they do for reasons, you will be indexed and you might be found. So add them there. I personally like putting awards in bold at the top and great reviews in italics in the bottom, but that's just my personal taste. The other thing to think about is to update your cover files with an award sticker. Even if you're not going to reprint the physical book, you may as well just throw that into the ebook, right? And stick it up on Amazon, who cares? Finally, if something in the news introduces a new way to talk about the topic of a backlist title, go through and add it to your keywords. What I like to call my backlist booster is just do that thing we just did with the Amazon bestseller ranks with your backlist. So if a best-selling title has come out brand new and you're like, hey, that's kind of like that book I published 5 years ago, go steal whatever categories it's in and drop it in your keywords and send it out. I don't recommend updating BISAC like that, but Thema and keywords definitely. And then finally, pay attention to the accessibility landscape. If somebody starts displaying accessible metadata in a way that's new and interesting, go check it out on their website and make sure your books are displaying properly. If they're not, figure out what's wrong with them, right? You're doing the work, let's show it off. All right, so in brief, metadata for discoverability. Make sure your books are available. Make sure your metadata looks good. Make your keywords and categories super relevant and thoughtful, and do not forget about your backlist. And that brings us to questions. I hustled through and we made it with 13 minutes to spare for our question period.
There's one in the chat here, Amanda. Is there
perfect.
an number of reviews that should be displayed at one time? Can you have too many?
I think that is a question of personal taste. Depending on where you put them. If you have 500 great reviews and they are all in your copy, don't do that. It's just going to look untidy and unpleasant. I would probably say I wouldn't do more than 10 or 12, but it's not a hard limit. Let me rephrase that. I would put 2 at most in my copy, my descriptive copy, and I would put 10 to 12 in the actual review section. I wouldn't do more than that. After that, it just becomes a wall of text. Like, now we know your book is popular. Thank you.
And
But
also, I've never really seen more than like 4 or 5 in the actual metadata.
yeah.
It can
Mhm.
get kind of complicated if you're a spreadsheet user adding them all in as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another one here from Adam. If we see more NA vendors using Thema, would the end goal be to replace or supplement BISACs?
Interesting question, Adam. I am not the BISG. I do not know for sure what their thought is. I don't think their plan is to be replaced by Thema. I think the plan is that they will always supplement BISAC, and BISG is working really hard to keep BISAC up to date in a way that BIC wasn't, obviously. So I don't think that we will see BISAC replaced. What I think that we will see, if you will allow me a bit of futurism here, is that I think newer digital vendors are going to use exclusively Thema, and you'll see some really cool categories and filtering functionality within Thema. I don't think Indigo is ever going to stop using BISAC. So yeah, sorry, you got to do both.
Yeah, those big changes always need to be reiterated by the vendors, unfortunately, which doesn't always happen.
Oh, what an interesting question from Bruce. Okay. How much, if any, DC : subject entries is it useful to be putting in the schema for discoverability purposes? Worth putting in BISAC codes, keywords, etc.? I would say not very useful. I would put your main BISAC or your main Thema in there, but I wouldn't fuss about doing a ton of them. Anybody taking schema data is also taking Onyx, and for the most part, it's actually going to be libraries who are working within their own coding anyway. So nobody will be exclusively using DC subject. There's not a lot of sense in replicating that. One is fine. In other words, to answer your question simply, which as you can all tell, I'm not terribly good at doing. Yes, one is good. Okay, anything else?
Amanda, I have a couple of questions, if I may, if the chat
Of
says.
course.
Can I ask, in terms of putting anything about a book's format that might make it accessible into our metadata, what about in that long description field? Could you put a sentence at the end that says, this book is made with this, in this format, blah, blah, blah? What do you think of that?
You know what? I have seen a publisher do that. That's one of the things I couldn't find for that slide. I couldn't find it again. I actually like it. I think that that's a really good idea. I think that it's, in addition to being useful for a reader who might read it and go, oh, thank God, at least I know this is screen reader friendly. It's also useful just to raise the bar of, hey, we're talking about this. Everybody remember this is an issue. There are 2 downsides to it. The first downside is that, for example, Amazon and some other retailers are a little loosey-goosey about what they consider attached to any given format. So if you send it for your digital format, they may decide to apply that text to the print as well. If they, for whatever reason, the algorithm likes it better than the print copy that you're sending. So that's not best practice. They shouldn't do that, but they do. So you may lose track of what it's being assigned to. The other downside, well, one of the big downsides of accessibility metadata in general is if you get it wrong, but you shouldn't be doing that. Assuming that you're getting it right, assuming that you know what you're doing, I would put it in there just because why not? Let's remind people that ebooks aren't inherently accessible and that we need to work to do it. But I don't know that it will aid. It won't move the needle on discoverability, but it might help users. So, yeah.
Okay, that's a great point. And I hear you on, thinking about how Amazon might ingest it, and perhaps then you keep that in mind when you're writing your statement that the ebook version of this book, or
oh, that's a good idea. Yeah,
you could put in. Yeah, okay.
That's a really good idea, actually. I like that a lot. Yeah, the ebook version of this book conforms with whatever standard. Yeah.
Oh, how exciting for everyone on this call for updating the long descriptions.
I can see excitement rolling across everyone's face. Yeah.
Look at these excellent projects we're coming up with. Okay, I had another question, which was a follow-up to your comment about do not mix BISACs of juvenile and adult, or juvenile and YA. Don't do it. I hear you. And let's say you work at an organization where you have someone in-house who's saying, don't do it. It's the rule.
Uh-oh.
Say you have someone else in-house who says, but what's the worst that could happen? It really is supposed to be for ages 11 to 18.
Emma was so excited to answer this question. Emma, take it away.
I just spent so much time fixing something like this. So they won't go up to for sale. Apple especially, which is a big vendor for a lot of people, they will get blocked from sale. I don't know if Amanda, you know of other vendors that's the case, but yeah, I've had to fix so many, and then you're at the point of like doing metadata extracts and trying to go through and find all of them, and if they've all been updated that way, it's kind of a nightmare to fix. So yeah, even if there is a broad range, you kind of have to decide if it's for kids, then it needs to go for that juvenile audience, and you have to make that distinction, unfortunately.
Kate, that's super helpful. It will be blocked.
Yeah.
It will be blocked. Yeah, it will not be
sold.
for sale. It will not make you money.
It will be anti-discoverable.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no other questions in the chat or anything. Did anyone else have any last minute ones? Amanda, did you want to put our emails back up maybe, just in case?
Yes. I put them both on this slide at the end.
Oh,
I
yeah,
liked I liked your
lovely.
picture, so I added it.
It was supposed to be a GIF, but
Oh,
yeah, you sounded very into the Schitt's Creek GIFs. So if you have our newsletter, you will see that.
All right, I don't see anything else in the chat, so I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you so much, both of you, for this brain dump of all these interesting things that we get to come away with. A little reminder for all the participants that this webinar is the second in a trio, or a trilogy, if you will, of professional development sessions that Books BC and eBOUND are partnering on, with our third and final session coming up on November 22nd. This one will be about creating a born accessible workflow for ebooks with Sahiba Shah and Elizabeth Krahler of eBOUND. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I should have clarified the pronunciation of your last name first. They're both on this call listening in right now. And that will be November 22nd. I just popped the link to register into the chat if anyone would like to register for that. Of course, we'll be sending around some email reminders about that as we get closer. And I will send out slides. I will send out a little evaluation for this afterwards, including the emails of Emma and Amanda in it. And providing our recording worked out well, I will also follow up with that. So thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you very much to Emma and Amanda.
Thank you so much, everyone.
thanks, everyone.